Greetings, fellow music nerds, and welcome to Season 9 of the Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast. I am your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Henhouse studio in Nashville, Tennessee. This season, I'll be taking you on a journey down the many rabbit holes in the process of making great music. I'll be speaking to instrumentalists, songwriters, producers, up-and-comers through legendary veterans, and we'll go deep into their history and their process of creating unforgettable music. This podcast continues to be listener-supported. You can help keep the show going with a Patreon subscription, and for as little as a few bucks a month, you'll support the show and get entered into our incredible giveaway that I'll be talking about throughout the season. You can get links to all this at makersandshakerspodcast.com. And if you can't do that, please subscribe for free to the show at Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That helps us out greatly as well. Meanwhile, a huge thanks to the main sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know I sent you. They are Larrivee Guitars, Chase Bliss Pedals, Fab Filter, Odyssey Headphones, Railtown Mastering, Isotope, and the Henhouse Hang. We absolutely could not produce this show without them. All right, thanks for tuning in. Let's get down to it with another episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. Hey there, all you music nerds, and welcome to episode number 182. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. My guest today is the great pedal steel player, Bruce Bouton. Bruce is a humble dude, but don't let that fool you. He's highly accomplished and a precise musician and steel player, masterful musician. And he's had an incredible career playing on some of the biggest records in the 80s and 90s country world, and then an incredible discography that continues through today. Before we get going, I just want to remind you that you can support the show and get entered in our end-of-year giveaway automatically and get access to our first 80 or so episodes that are now for Patreon subscribers only by signing up to our Patreon for just a few bucks a month, and the links for that are all at makersandshakerspodcast.com. You're automatically entered in the final year draw, and the prizes are insane, and every month that you're a supporter, you'll get entered once again. So the longer you support the show, the better your chances are of winning. And there's prizes like a Larrivee D40 mahogany guitar up for grabs. It's worth over $2,000. We have a pair of Odyssey MM100 headphones, which are insanely awesome headphones, a Chase Bliss Brothers AM pedal, a Fab Filter Essentials plug-in bundle, a DI from Spectra 1964, and some cool stuff from Union Tube and Transistor. So hop in now, win some amazing stuff, and support the show all at the same time. How could you possibly go wrong? Okay, let's dive into the episode. Bruce was nice enough to drop by to do this. I met him at a show I was doing with my band, the Volcano Brothers, and being in Nashville and playing that kind of music, which is like early Hawaiian music, brings out some of the craziest people. Recently, we had Russ Paul and Lloyd Green plopped themselves right down in front of us a few feet away, which was intimidating to say the least, and awesome at the same time. That's also where I met Bruce a couple of months ago. So that was really cool to meet him and have him at our gig. And if you don't know Bruce's name, you likely know his playing. He was a key member of the Ricky Skaggs band before Ricky kind of went back into bluegrass when they were really popping from around 82 until 85 or so, including some of his best albums from that era. And then while Garth Brooks was never totally my bag, you can't deny the absolute mega success of his albums. And Bruce played a huge role on pretty much everything of Garth Brooks's from, I don't know, I think about 89 until 98 or so, and then some more recent stuff as well. He was also a big part of Brooks and Dunn's record and played on albums for Emmylou Harris, Kathy Mattea, Conway Twitty, Leanne Rimes, Keith Urban, and even some Taylor Swift stuff. Not too shabby, I must say. Anyway, we had a great conversation. It was interesting to hear about Bruce's path through a wild career. And, you know, I first heard about him through an instructional video I got when I was starting to play steel. And I got to say it was the best teaching I ever had when I was learning some of the foundations of playing the instrument. So if you're into pedal steel and you're looking for a good instructional DVD, that's the one. I can't even remember what it's called, but it's Bruce Bouton's. It's the only one. It's his instructional pedal steel DVD. It's awesome. Anyway, we had a great time talking about all this stuff, so let's get down to it. Here is my conversation with Bruce Bouton.
Well, I think the first time I went to Canada, I was working, I don't know if I even made it to Canada. It might have just been to Buffalo, but I looked at Canada when I was in the 70s. I rode up I think in 71 or something, I was still in high school and I was working for the CIA or somebody, you know. I was just a janitor or something, but we had to, I remember going up to Niagara Falls and looking across the falls and seeing Canada.
The mystical land of Canada.
First time I played up there,
It would have been with Skaggs, like that was your
Probably.
first?
I don't think I went up there with Johnny Russell or Jimmy C. Newman. Jimmy C. Newman didn't go up there. I was doing Opry gigs. But the first time I remember going to Canada, pretty spectacular. I'd just gotten the job with Ricky Skaggs. And, we'd done the first album.
This is around 80, 81 kind of thing, probably?
80 or 81. And I remember we booked a cross-Canadian tour.
Oof, my heart
goes
out to you.
Yeah, we started up in the Maritimes and went all the way across to Vancouver.
Whoa.
But we shared it with Ian Tyson's. He opened for us.
Oh, man.
And
that's a good Canadian experience for you right there.
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, it was, but I guess they'd built all the Jubilee halls. Uh-huh. They had just finished them, so we played a bunch of these brand new, beautiful theaters in some of these towns, and they're about 3,000 square foot theaters.
For anyone a lot of people won't know, but the Jubes, they're called the Jube, and it's an identical, like literally identical venue in Calgary and Edmonton, which are 3 hours away, and often you play both, and you'll leave one, pack up and leave, and then arrive at the other one, and it's the exact same layout, and it's a little trippy. Yeah,
and I think they had one in, I don't know if there's one in Saskatchewan, or Alberta. I can't. Not that. The Alberta they were.
Yeah, Calgary and Edmonton are the only two that I was ever aware.
Well, they had one in Ottawa.
Okay.
Or maybe they were called a different hall in the East Coast. I don't know. But then we played. But we also started out in New Brunswick or something. And then worked our way down, and then came across, and we. Actually, I think both times we went in through Toronto, and one time we went east and one time we went west. Because I remember we didn't play Montreal, but we had a night off, and the piano player and I somehow got into Montreal and had a good time, to say the least. This was St. Catherine Street or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty amazing because, work with the Ian band, they were all, they all rocked hard. And
I wonder, I'm just trying to think of who would have been in the band.
Mark was in the band. Mark, what was Mark's last name?
Was there a Whiteley, like a Chris or Ken Whiteley Chris Whiteley?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
Jeff Bradshaw, I think.
Jeff Bradshaw was playing steel.
He was playing steel.
Okay. Yeah, he's notoriously crusty, but I know a lot of people that have played with him over the years. And
great player.
Bradshaw?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I meant Tyson was notoriously crusty.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't see him. I got to be buddies with Neil McGonigal. I think my laughs, I remember Neil was Neil's manager. Was Ian's manager at the time, and I guess he managed Jan Arden. But back then, I thought he's just cool, man. He's a manager, and I remember he and I were standing on the front of the ferry going over to Vancouver Island,
sure,
and having a conversation. But it was just kind of a blur because I think I partied a lot back then.
Did
and Ray Flack was in the band, and that's where I learned how much Canadians could drink.
Let's talk about that band for a second. There's other places we could start, but since you're talking about the Skaggs band, this is like the early '80s. I think he'd probably already done 2 records before you joined the band.
No, I did. He did one record called "Don't Cheat in Our Hometown" that he cut with the Hot Band. No, Sweet Temptation. It wasn't called "Don't Cheat in Our Hometown." It was called "Sweet Temptation," and he cut it with the Hot Band out at the Enactron truck, I think, a lot of it, and just because he was working with Emmylou at the time. But I was playing.
What a band! Come on.
Yeah, I was playing with. It was a great band, but I was playing with Lacey J. Dalton, who was supposed to be the female outlaw, Waylon Jennings, Paycheck, and everything. CBS put a lot of money behind him, so I had been on a tour all summer in Winnebago, going all across the country, and it was a rough tour. A lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs, but it was exciting. We played every TV show in America, and I had known this guitar player named Ray Flack. And in fact, when I first moved to Nashville, I used to room with him, and I'm out with Lacey, and Ray calls me up, or I get back into town, I'm seeing Ray, and he says, "Man, I just did a session with Rodney Crowell." And Ricky Skaggs was playing acoustic and mandolin on the session. And he's got a gig with he got a record deal with CBS, and he's putting a band together. And he asked me if I knew a steel player, and I told him about you. So as Slack said, you need to get in his face every opportunity you get. And it was just timing-wise, it just worked out that we did a couple festivals. And Lacey and Emmy was on the festival, and Lacey was on the festival. So I introduced myself to Ricky, and then I got back to Nashville.
He hadn't heard you play at this point?
No, not really. I mean, he didn't know anything about me, and I hadn't never done any recording or anything.
Never?
I did a couple demos, but that was about it. And I get a call from Ray, and he said, "Hey, man, get your steel, go down, set up at this club. Ricky's coming down." And I went down there, and Ricky came over the next day and sat in my living room. And just he and I and an acoustic guitar, we did the whole Waiting for the Sun to Shine album, acoustic and steel.
Oh, so he was like in pre-pro mode, kind of like the
and
songs were written.
We played well, they were old songs. He wasn't writing, but they were just old classic songs, most of them. Uh-huh. And I just played, and afterwards he offered me the job, he said. Wow. And I said, "Man, I don't know. Can I sleep on it?" Because I was scared. It was so country.
Really?
It was just, but I was probably going to be let go from Lacey because I don't know, she wasn't going to probably have the same band or something. But I had an opportunity. Steve Fischel had quit. He was now in Emmy's band, and he had worked with Ricky for 6 or 8 months already. And but he had left Commander Cody, and apparently Commander Cody was looking for a steel player. So I called Fischel up and said, "Man, I don't know, man. This Ricky Skaggs came over, but that Commander Cody gig's still open." And Fischel said, "Dude, do not pass go. You need to get up in the morning and call Ricky and tell him you'll take this gig. It's not going to be the hot band, but it's going to be a hot band." And I called Ricky the next morning because we didn't have cell phones back then or didn't have any of that stuff. And I called Ricky and I said, "Ricky, I'd like to do the job." And he said, "Well, man, I'm glad you did that." And I said, "Can I play on your record?" And I'd never played on a record in my life. And 2 weeks later, I was in the studio with Ray and Bobby
insane.
Hicks. And we kept crying my heart out over you and I Don't Care. And, I don't know. I don't even remember all the songs. If That's the Way You Feel.
Tell me a bit about those sessions. Like, where were they?
They were at a place called Audio Media, and it was we did it on 24-track, and a guy named Marshall Morgan engineered, who was a brilliant engineer. And Audio Media was owned by these two guys. You can't make this up, Jack Jackson and Pat Patrick. And they basically had that studio because they had the K-Tel account. Back then, okay. K-Tel sound-alikes. Yeah. So they had this studio, and that's where Paul Worley and Michael Rhodes and Eddie Bears and Dennis Burnside and all those guys cut their teeth back in the late 70s, early 80s. But
was it a cool room?
Yeah, it was a great room. I don't remember it being especially big.
It was down like on Music Row somewhere?
Yeah, it was down on Music Row. Uh-huh. And we went in, and I walked in, and it was, Joe Osborne was on the session, and Jerry Croon. They were playing bass and drums, and Joe Osborne was a legendary, Wrecking Crew bass player. And it was so funny because I just read an article with Steve Stills in Guitar Player magazine, where Stills was talking about how he used to put barbecue on his bass strings to get them barbecue sauce to get them worked in, and then he'd boil them or something. And he said, hell, Joe Osborne hadn't changed his strings since 1958. So I walk in, and there's Joe Osborne, and so I didn't know what to say. I'm scared to death. And I said, Joe, man, I said, how are you? I said, man, I heard you hadn't changed your strings since 1958. And he said, and Joe's a sweet guy, but he wasn't a big smiley kind of guy. He was just kind of, I said, I had to break him. He said, I had to replace him last week. I broke one of the son of a guns. And it was just, so he had new flat wound strings.
Oh, wow.
And Buck White played piano, and Ray played electric, and a guy named great fiddle player named Bobby Hicks played fiddle.
Was Ray Flack well known around here at that time?
No. He was just but he was known. Everybody knew he was a hot guitar player, but he was just getting started. I mean, it was just because everybody, Albert Lee was the dude, and here comes another Englishman. Albert didn't live here, but Ray came here. Yeah. And so anyway, we made that record, and then we just started touring, and it was just, we had a bus for about 2 months, and Ricky called us in and said, hey, man, we're going to have to go to a van and a station wagon. They stopped tour support.
Oh, my God.
So we traveled, I think that first year we were out 300 days.
Oh, man. Hardcore.
And
so were you like in your early 20s at this point?
I was 25.
Wow. And so that session for that record, I mean, there's some intricate guitar steel interplay on that stuff. Did you and Ray sit down and work that stuff out, or like how did that all shake down?
I don't know how intricate it was. I think with Ricky, it was kind of like the bluegrass mentality, because it was like a palette, you know.
Right.
I mean, in bluegrass music, you know, the singer's up there and then he steps away and the banjo player steps up and this and that. And that's, the Ricky stuff, it was just these songs were just such great old classic songs. And there was just a space where you put them in. And I didn't know what I was doing. And Ray probably knew more about what he was doing than I did. But
so you'd never made a record before?
No.
That's crazy.
And then I went over.
That's a great record.
Oh, thanks. And then I went over to overdub, and he had me double.
Yeah, there's some double steel in there, right?
I think just about the whole record is doubled steel, but it was
What's that all about?
He called it cloning, but you can't really tell it's doubled because I think I only knew so much. I had a limited amount of stuff that I knew, but I knew it, so it wasn't like I'd gone in.
This is Ricky that called it cloning?
Yeah.
And it's something that he specifically wanted.
I think that's what Brian Ahern probably called it, because Brian Ahern doubled a lot of stuff on those Emmy records.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you can, and I think the steel was doubled a lot. I think Hank doubled stuff. DeVito,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I'm assuming. But that's where Ricky learned about editing and solos, and because when we got into the second album, with Highway 40 and One Way Rider and those things, of course at that point he got a couple other steel players on there. He got Lloyd Green and Weldon Marek.
But you're on that record too.
Yeah, I'm on that record too. But I was devastated, man. Because I'd played on the first record, and he's doing the second record, and I found out I wasn't on the whole thing, and I went to Ricky. I said, man, he said, Bruce. He said, this is my record. I want to have Lloyd Green and I want to have Weldon. And of course, it was great because I learned a bunch of stuff from their playing,
Yeah.
But I had trouble on that first record for a couple songs, because just I didn't know a lot. I didn't know a lot about tuning my guitar.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I didn't understand why, I could be on the third fret and, be really in tune with the G chord, and when I hit the two pedals, I could be in tune with the C chord. But then when I moved up three frets and hit my E to F lever, I wasn't in tune over the fret, and it took me a while to realize, to all of a sudden go, well, wait a minute, that one string was a fifth here, and then it became a third, and then it's a root. So you got to compensate with your bar. So things like that. I mean, it took me a while to.
So how long had you been playing at this point?
So 1980, about 6 years.
Wow.
I started 7 years. I started in 73 when I was living in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah. And were you playing guitar or anything before that?
I was trying to learn how to play guitar like Clarence White, and trying being the operative word. And then somebody said to me, man, you need to get a steel. He said, you like steel. That's what he said. He said, you like that sound. There's a guy who's got a steel for sale down the street. And I said, nah, man, I'm too old. Because when you're 20 years old, 19, 20, your life's about over,
Yeah, that's right.
And I walked in to buy a tortoiseshell pick. That's how long ago this was. This would have been 73.
Real tortoiseshell.
Yeah, and I walked in to buy a tortoiseshell pick, and I looked up, and there was a magazine with Pete Drake on the cover, a guitar player magazine, and I opened it up, and it said, first question was, what made you start playing steel? And he said, well, I was 19 years old and I was driving a bread truck and realized there had to be a better way to make a living. So that was, to me, that was a sign from the universe.
Yeah.
And I got my mom to sign for the loan, and I got the steel.
What was it?
It was an Emmons.
Oh, okay. So
It's
like
a double neck Emmons. Yeah,
instrument.
Bouton. I wish I could get it back. I've sold that guitar twice.
Really?
Yeah.
You sold it, got it back, and sold
it again.
You didn't learn your lesson.
No, I still haven't. But,
or you really needed the cash, maybe.
No, I didn't. Those bolt-on guitars were harder to keep in tune. But there was a music store across the river that was owned by a steel player. And all the steel players around the area in Virginia would come hang out there. And I was kind of the science experiment because I was the hippie kid from the college neighborhood. So they would all show me things. And then I got to meet Buddy Charlton, who was...
How?
This guy, Teddy Lloyd, invited me to a jam session. Buddy was there. And we found out that Buddy was teaching up in Oxon Hill, Maryland. So my buddy Jay Jessup and I would drive up to Oxon Hill and take lessons, $15 an hour.
You took lessons from Buddy Charlton?
Yeah.
Wow. Like beginner lessons, or were you kind of getting your shit together already?
Oh, I knew a little bit, but I mean, it was just.
I love that guy, man. I love his playing.
Yeah, and my only regret is that I never ever learned all those tunes that he taught me. I learned a little bit of them, and then.
Did you document those in any way, or no? You just.
I think I've got some cassettes somewhere, which really? I need to actually go find them, and then find a cassette player and figure out how to preserve them.
Yeah. I
think if I can find them, I don't even know if cassettes, they would be 50 years old now. But Buddy always told me, he said, man, you were my best student because you would go in and you'd never learn the songs like I taught you, but you would learn one part and you would learn how to use it.
Yeah.
In songs.
Yeah. That's great advice, actually.
I got, because there's a couple great steel players here in Nashville that we all studied from Buddy at the same time. A guy named Tommy Hannum, who's just so innovative and so different. And Pete Finney. Yep. Pete studied from Buddy.
Did he? Okay.
And the late Bucky Baxter, who was my bad brother. Bucky's the guy who got me to Nashville for the first time.
How did that happen?
Oh, I was in a really great college band, and I'd quit that band so many times that they finally let me stay quit. And Bucky had been...
You were playing steel for this band?
Yeah, I was playing steel. It was a band called the Good Humor Band, and Bucky was the kind of roadie for us, But when I got up and sang Eagles songs or Jackson Browne songs or something, Bucky would get up and play steel. Oh. So when I quit, Bucky took the gig, and because I wanted them to move to Nashville or move to D.C. or whatever, and I just finally quit, and I moved back to D.C. and I'd played in about 5 bands in a year, different bands up there. None of them were as good as the band I'd quit, and I was driving rental cars back and forth between Dulles and National Airport to make a living. Bucky said, man, let's go to Nashville. Paul Franklin's giving lessons for $15 an hour.
Really?
And I said, I don't have any money. He said, well, my dad will lend you the money. And so basically his dad lent me $100. We took Bucky's old car and we drove down here. And I knew one guy from named Sam Lorber, who was a great songwriter. And I called him up to see if we could stay at his house. And he said, well, no, but you can stay over here. This guy will let you stay. He's got a place probably. And, he's another Virginia boy. But we're having a barbecue because this English guitar player is coming into town. And it was Ray Flack. Yep. And so Ray, I still don't know how those two connected, where it was, maybe word of mouth or something. But we went over to Sam's house, and Ray shows up with 2 bottles of vodka, and we just started playing music, Merle Haggard, just all kinds of different stuff. And then I went back to Virginia, and I was playing this club in Baltimore, Maryland, which was about 50 miles from where I lived. And it was grueling, but a guy called me in one day and said, man, I'm going to have to let you go. We're not doing enough business. And so I called my girlfriend. I said, I'm moving to Nashville. And I moved down here.
Wow. That was that.
November 18th, 78, and had $150 and moved down here. And then later on, Bucky came down, slept on my couch, and Tommy Hannum slept on my couch. And Pete Finney had decided to go to Austin first. Yeah. And he worked in Austin for a long time before he came here.
How together was your shit at that point? Like, were you playing well? And
no. I mean, I was okay, but I mean, I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was playing down at the Wheel. Broadway was a war zone at this time, and there was only 2 places. There was Tootsie's and a place across the street called the Wheel, and I was playing, and Merchants, and I was playing at the Wheel.
So you got a gig with like a country band? Or
No,
something?
I just you went down there on Broadway. Somebody hired me. They paid $12 a night, and it was rough, man. I mean, it's pimps and hookers and drug dealers and everything else. But in walked the three young guns, Johnny Cox, Paul Franklin, Mike Smith walked in.
Whoa.
And I'm playing, and I knew exactly who they were. And they sat there, and they had their arms folded, and they were watching me. And we didn't even get through the first song, and one whispered to the other, and the other whispered to the other, and they walked out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I mean, no, I sucked.
Had you taken any lessons from Paul Franklin at this point?
Yeah, I'd already taken those. I'd already come down and taken a couple of, but my problem was, man, I mean, I look back, I don't drink anymore, but I used to drink a lot, and especially I partied a lot and everything. And I was sitting there, I look back and I go, I had so many opportunities. If I had just paid a little more attention, I could have been a virtuoso, I mean, because it was, I lived on a street, and 2 blocks down, Bela Fleck and Mark O'Connor and Mark Schatz had a house, and Jerry Douglas lived across the street from me. Yeah. And they were everything was accessible. I could, and I've had a really good career. I can't have regret. There's nothing I can do about it. However, I had a lot of opportunity where I just sit there if I'd have had the mindset. Yeah, I practiced a lot early on, especially before I moved to Nashville. Yeah. Just mechanically getting things together. But I mean,
what was your process for that? Like, were you tearing apart solos of the classic players and stuff, or were you kind of more like just developing your own sound? Because you've got a totally unique sound that maybe it's better you didn't sit there shedding your ass off for 20 years.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, but I've actually heard that from other people too, and I realize that I don't remember that lick that Buddy Emmons played on that obscure Ray Price record, or I don't know the.
But at one point you did, or you sort of sucked in the.
No, I started out. I was a country rock player first, because I listened to, I was into, the Burrito Brothers and folk music and Graham Parsons and the Byrds and stuff like that. I didn't really know much about country, and then I started playing in some country bands, and I learned about Waylon, but I didn't sit there and really digest Mooney. I just started.
I think that's cool, man. I think it's cool. Like it's a great way to develop your own sound.
Well, I got lucky. I mean, I think, I was a choir singer. I was a madrigal singer in high school, and I was in a really incredible madrigal group. It was life-changing because I had a pretty troubled childhood. I won't go into all that, but my family was pretty much falling apart, and this was in the late 60s, 69, 70, and I was smoking a lot of weed and taking a lot of acid, and just really, maybe I'd make an A or maybe I'd make an F depending on the day. Mm-hmm. And I got asked to audition for this choir. I got the opportunity to audition for this choir in this madrigal group, and I got in. And this guy, Robert Schaefer, was just, he had talked the school board into letting us have 2 hours a day.
Wow.
And so and then the principal of the school was just so into it, and the parents were into it. So all these composers on the East Coast would write for us. Oh. And we got to play all these amazing venues in D.C., all these society parties, and I did
high school kids?
Yeah, but I did the Bach B minor mass with the National Symphony, with an 18-voice chamber choir, and playing at Ascension of St. Agnes Church with the oldest Aeolian Skinner pipe organ in the United States, and the Phillips Collection Art Galleries, and just Kennedy Center. Did all kinds of stuff. Wow. And during that period of time, the guys in the band, we were all, they wanted to put a vocal band together where we do, so it was Beatles, and we did a Beach Boys song, and we did a Neil Young, a couple Neil Young things. And I sang the Neil Young songs, and we did some Bird stuff. And I mean, it was just, and...
you probably learned a lot from that about harmony and stuff, whether you did whether you technically learned it or not, it was probably innately, it affected your steel playing in a way, because there's so much harmonic knowledge that you have to kind of be aware of, whether you know theoretically what's happening or whether it's just innately in your brain. But you probably got a lot of that ingrained in your head from singing then.
I don't know, man. It's just weird. I'm very grateful for just this composition, you know, but I'd never studied composition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never went to music school or anything, but you just, you know, pop music, man. I mean, I just was, you know, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
A lot of people I talked to, that was the day, that was the moment.
I mean, I freaked. I mean, it was just, you know, and I you know, but it's just, you know, as I got into, you know, as things started happening in Nashville for me, as I started doing more sessions, and I remember I used to work with a great fiddle player named Rob Hajakus, you know, and Rob and I did the first 4 Brooks and Dunn records together, and we did all the Garth records. But Rob and I used to geek out in the parking lot after sessions and talk about, where do you build a song? Where's the stress point in a song? Where do you lift it up? Where do you hand it over to the fiddle? All this kind of stuff. And, you know, when I was doing sessions, I just would listen to the radio, and, you know, one day I'd, you know, the same song over a period of time. One day I'd just say, what's the bass doing? Mm-hmm. What are the drums doing here? You know, and just, so I don't know. I mean, it's all that stuff. You know, I honestly think, in a lot of ways, and I think you could probably appreciate this, the universe gives us a gift, I think, sometimes, mm-hmm. you know, of music, you know, where all of a sudden, you God-given, whatever, you know, you can't help yourself. And if you're lucky and you can figure out how to make a living in this friggin' business, you know, that's
it's a whole different set of shit than it was in 1980, I'll tell you that right now. You got here at a really interesting time when there was still that generation of like Hal Rugg and Weldon Myrick, and those guys were working, and Lloyd Green was, I mean, he's still here, but you know, he was probably still in the studios and stuff like that. Did you have a lot of interaction with those guys?
They were all so good to me.
Yeah. Any most memorable of the bunch? But you met Buddy Emmons, right?
Yeah. Another big regret that I didn't spend more time with Buddy. Buddy scared the shit out of me.
Just because of his...
Just because he's Buddy Emmons. In my opinion, he's the greatest steel player that ever lived.
Yeah.
I mean, if I, you know, and I love Lloyd too. I mean, Lloyd and Buddy were my 2 guys. And as I've gotten older, I really have a lot more appreciation for Pete Drake. You know, we didn't...
Did you ever meet him?
Oh, Pete was so good to me.
Really?
I'd moved here November 18th, 1978, and I think probably November 30th, I walked into Pete Drake's studio, and there was a young gal behind the desk, and I said, "Pete Drake owns this place?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Does he ever come in here?" "Yes." And I said, "Well, I'm a steel player. I wonder if I could ever meet him." And she said, "Well, he's doing a session tonight. Just come on by. It's a 6 o'clock session. Come by about 5:30 and keep your mouth shut."
Dang.
And I showed up, and Pete walked in. He had a cigarette in his mouth, and he walked in, and he looked at Marianne Kennedy, who became a legendary songwriter, but at the time she was still working at it. And he looked at Marianne, and he said, "Who's that?" And she said, "It's a steel player." And he turned around and he went, "Pete Drake."
Wow.
And I stayed there and I watched the session, and I don't know who was on it, but it was all legendary guys, you know, because at this point Pete had started producing a lot. And afterwards, they just started talking and sort of holding court. And Al Pachuki was the engineer, and he'd produced the Elvis, he'd engineered a bunch of Elvis stuff. And, you know, everybody was talking, and I'm just like, and afterwards I finally had to go because I was working a factory job that I had to be at 7:30. And Pete said, "Come back anytime." And so I hung out with Pete a lot. Wow. And I'd go over there, and I'd sit in the back room, and I'd meet all the different guys. And he liked to hire different steel players.
Oh, so he would produce sessions and not play?
Yeah. Okay. He didn't play unless it was really a big thing, you know.
Had he lost some facility in his old age?
I don't think so. He's late 40s. He died. Wow, okay. He died in his 50s. Wow. Emphysema. It was because he'd have 2 or 3 cigarettes burning at the same time.
Oh, that'll do it. So who would he hire to play steel generally?
Well, yeah, Jimmy Crawford and Lloyd seemed to be the two guys. But he'd hire House sometimes. He'd hire, who knows? I mean, but I started working the Opry too. I started working the Opry before I got with Skaggs because I was with Jimmy C. Newman and Johnny Russell, and they were both Opry members. So I got to know Weldon.
He was the house guy at the Opry then?
Yeah, he was the house guy. Him, Sonny Burnett, and Hal. I don't know, man. They were all they all let me come over and take a lesson. Weldon never really showed me anything, but we went over and worked on steels a couple times.
You did? Just like the technical stuff?
Yeah, well, the Legrand came out, and the Legrands we were worried about cabinet drop and everything, so we were trying different experiments to try to, because the push-pull, everybody was playing push-pulls. But yeah, they were all really, really sweet to me, even Buddy. But as I said, Buddy scared me. I went over to his house one time and was so intimidated, I didn't go back. And,
really?
I wish I had, because
Where was he living then?
Same place. He'd always lived out in Hermitage.
Okay.
And
was he a nice enough guy? Or
he's great.
Yeah,
he's great. But I had
You're just freaked right out.
No, I had a faux pas, man. We had a really good. He just showed me a bunch of stuff, and I've actually got the lesson somewhere.
Oh, like you took a lesson from him?
Yeah, but he didn't charge me for it.
It was
he just invited me over. I'd already played with Ricky Skaggs, so he knew what I did. But his wife Peggy invited me to stay for dinner, and I was just really excited. She said, "Well, we're only having hamburgers. I grilled them on the grill, and blah blah blah." And well, it's fine with me. And she said, Buddy likes milk. You like milk? And I hated milk, but I said, sure, I love milk.
If Buddy does.
And they bought this tray down, and Buddy's basement looked like a science lab. He had open steels and amps taken apart and all astronomy, telescope, and all this kind of stuff. And this tray with burgers and stuff, and I sat there and I lifted my plate off the tray, and it upset the balance of the tray. And the burgers started flying through the air, and I think it all went in slow motion.
Sure.
And tomato hit him in the forehead, and a burger hit him in the chest, and the milk landed in a steel, and he was jumping up and down, dancing, getting all the food off him. And I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I did not call him up, and but he would have been fine if I'd have called him and said, "Hey," he'd say, "Well, come on over," because he was just shy. But there was a guy named Jeff Newman, who was fucking amazing, man. Jeff had a steel guitar school.
Yeah, I mean, I up in Canada, I didn't take lessons, but I bought those DVDs as well as yours.
Yeah, well, well, thank you. He had a trailer up by the Waffle House up in Hermitage, and there was nothing on that exit, but he had this trailer. He had a bunkhouse trailer and then a teaching trailer, and he would run these steel schools. And I actually met the great Canadian Ron Gann down there. Ron came down and took a week-long thing. But so
he would actually have like a class with like a number of people.
Yeah,
in it,
and they would all bunkhouse in the thing. But every day he'd do this thing, and on Thursday nights he'd have somebody come out and play, and there'd be a bass player and a drummer and it's steel, and maybe a guitar player. But it was always like Hal or Lloyd or Buddy Emmons, and he and Fran were so gracious. We didn't have any money, we didn't have anything, but we'd go out and eat cookies and drink coffee and watch Buddy Emmons from basically from here to, that wall over there, which is 10 feet maybe away. Maybe. And, I remember when the PV, when Buddy got the new Bill Lawrence pickup, when that first humbucker thing came out, for steel, and that was a big deal. And PV would come into town and they'd have a new amp and they'd want to, and, there's just a lot of great stuff back then. All the steel players would, there's always something going on. And, guys like Terry Crisp, just brilliant players were, Paul was just amazingly generous back then.
Paul Franklin.
Yeah, he hadn't started doing a lot of sessions yet. Mm-hmm. He was doing demos and stuff, but, he was like, yeah, come over. He'd have people, you go over and he'd just show you stuff. I mean, call him on the phone and he'd talk for an hour, Yeah. So I was lucky, man.
How did you feel like your playing was progressing from those first Skaggs records, which were like your first studio experiences? Were you feeling more confident as a player at that point, or you still you seem to maybe have some insecurity about your own playing at that point?
Oh yeah, I still do.
Yeah.
That's
just, probably a good thing.
It never ends, man. It's just I'm a little more comfortable in my own skin now. It's kind of like, shit, if you've hired me, you know what I do by now. But
but were you feeling confident if you got called to do a session? You were feeling like you could hold your own in this town.
I felt good on demo sessions, for most of the time. But no, man. I mean, there's still those moments where you're sitting there going, oh my God, what can I think of anything to play? And it's even harder now because the music is not, it's not the cadence of the music. A lot of this stuff, it's the same chord progression all the way.
Tell me about it.
And you're sitting there going, okay, where do I fit in? It's like today I did I was just doing sort of grunt work, session work today, but I remember it was like, you cut 5 or 6 songs in a 3-hour session, and what's happened with keyboards and what's happened with effects and everything, you need to carve out a space pretty quickly on your steel, or by the time they add the second and third keyboards and the second and third guitars, your history. And in a case now where it's a lot of the younger players don't really understand. See, I was lucky enough that I was on the cusp of change.
Yeah, you were.
You
were part of it that Garth Brooks whole world changed country music forever, really.
That happened, but the Skaggs thing changed a lot because it was it was urban cowboy and no disrespect, but Janie Fricke, T.G. Shepherd. It was this pop country stuff where the steel was, Sonny Garrish was playing on a lot of that stuff, but try to keep it buried. The DX7 had come out, and it was just kind of insipid music. And then all of a sudden, Ricky Skaggs comes out. Labels were terrified. They didn't know what to do. CBS didn't know what to do. But it blew up because of all the bluegrassers and all the people up in New England all of a sudden liked country music because this was real. This was like bluegrass and folk, and it blew up. And I will say, I'm not sure why, but Ricky really deserves the credit. They give Randy Travis, a lot of people give Randy Travis the credit or something, but Randy Travis wouldn't have happened if Ricky Skaggs hadn't happened. Marty Stewart.
And those records sold a lot of records, didn't they?
Yeah, because people don't realize that Ronnie McDowell and Barbara Mandrell and all those people, they had radio hits, but they might have sold 100,000 records. It was a publishing record label game. The record label heads were in cahoots with the publishers, and radio back then was
glorified payola.
Yeah, radio was not, it was against the law for a corporation to own more than a certain amount of radio stations. So there was all kinds of little pockets where you could make deals and you could build things up and this and that. But a publisher would have a relationship with a label head and basically, okay, let's do this song and we'll give you a little wet your beak here, get a little taste and all this. Ricky came out and broke all the rules, and he had a gold record. They almost shut the town down because the only people that were getting gold back then were the Outlaws, Willie and Waylon, and Kenny Rogers. So that was good. And then the Garth thing was pretty wild because what happened?
Like, how did you leave the Ricky? Did you have to quit at some point, or what?
No, I got fired.
You did?
Got fired right after I did the Live in London record.
Oh man, what a great record!
And
what happened?
Oh, it's being in a band too long. Ray had already left the band, and I was supposed to. I promised Ray I'd leave when he left, and then I just recorded the Country Boy album.
Oh man!
And I was like, if I leave the band, Ricky will take all my parts off. And I was like, I was sitting there. I was determined to. I had a game plan, I wanted to be a studio musician. I wanted to play.
You did have that aspiration, though.
I think once I tasted that and saw that, I liked the road too. But I realized that the studio thing was just calling my name, sort of. And so I left the Ricky band, and I couldn't get arrested. I mean, I
Really?
thought I'd played on 7 or 8 number one records, and I thought, boy, I'm just going to start doing sessions. But
Why is that?
I wasn't ready to do sessions yet. I didn't know how to read charts really, and I didn't know how to.
But you weren't getting calls because you were on those records saying, "Hey, we want."
No, I mean, I just think there were guys that were working. I mean, Paul was really starting to. He was starting to.
It is a
going.
small scene, and it always has been.
And Sonny was still strong, and I mean, it was just like I was embarrassingly aggressive about trying to get work, and that wasn't. I'm sure I turned some people off, but it was. I ended up having to go back out on the road with Mel Tillis, which was a great experience, and I was at home doing. And I've told this story before, but I was doing laundry one day. It was an all-night laundromat, and there was this kind of hippie girl in there, you know, and I started talking to her, and I said, "What do you do?" And she said, "I'm a singer, but I work at Fridays as a waitress." And I told her what I did and that I played with Ricky, and she said, "You played on those records?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I love your playing if I ever get a record deal." And I was in Canada and got a call from Alan Reynolds. The girl's name was Kathy Mattea. She ended up getting a record deal. Yeah. And Alan said, "Look, Kathy said I should call you." And I'd known Alan, but he'd always used Lloyd. He produced the Don Williams stuff and a bunch of different people. Yeah, for sure. So I actually I got a plane ticket and flew home from Canada to do that session.
Did you tell them that you were in town?
No, I mean, they said, "Can you do it on this Friday?" And I realized the bus wasn't going to get home in time, so I was going to have to suck it up. But this was going to be a master session. And it was a song called 18 Wheels and a Dozen Roses.
Oh, yeah, you're on that. Okay.
And Alan was really patient with me because I was, you know, there's a lot on that track, and I couldn't figure out a part to play or whatever, but I did what I did. And then, you know, I came back to town, and I left Mel's band because I'd written a song for T. Graham Brown called The Last Resort, and it was rising up the charts. And I realized I was going to make enough money. And about the same time, Radney Foster and Bill Lloyd called me up, and they wanted me to help them put together a band for a showcase. So I went in, and I was going to move to Canada, but then all of a sudden all this stuff started happening. I'm not to Canada. I was going to move to Australia. I had a gig in Australia, and I was going to just go down there and buy a house on the beach or whatever, and, you know, just start a new life, you know. And I ended up cutting Crazy Over You with Foster and Lloyd. Yeah, man. And then The Last Resort went to top 5, and I suddenly...
So that all kind of happened right around the same time?
Yeah, right around the end of when I quit Tillis. And so I stayed in town because I knew I was going to have money coming in from that song. And I got 1 or 2 calls a week, and then I started getting 3 or 4 calls a week, and then 5 or 6, and I started getting in. There was a lot of demos being done back then. There was a whole farm team of demo players, and you know, you could be a B-level player and still make $50,000 a year doing demos. So I was doing that. I ended up not moving to Australia. I got married, and then I got a call from Alan Reynolds, and he said, "I'm cutting this guy named Garth Brooks."
Who was totally unknown at the time.
Totally unknown. Yeah. And I remember walking in, he called me Mr. Bouton, and I looked at him, and I sort of recognized him. I said, "Have we met before?" And he said, "Yeah, you played on a demo that I sang on," because he was back then you had demo singers that would come in and sing live on the session, and they didn't have you know, Melodyne or anything, and they didn't have... You know, so Trisha Yearwood was singing demos, Garth, Joe Diffie, just so many people.
Garth was a demo singer at this point?
Yeah, Billy Dean. Well, Garth was doing, if people called him, not everybody called Garth. Garth wasn't like mainstream. Joe Diffie was.
Oh, wow.
Joe Diffie was singing on everything. Trisha, you know, but we cut I was overdubbing, and it was on Much Too Young to Be This Dang Old. And so I played that, and then I played 2 other songs, and I ended up hearing the rough mixes. Bob Doyle, who was his manager, played me the rough mixes, and I hated what I played on 2 of them.
Really?
Well, you know, there's circus fiddle on it. Buddy Spiker was playing on it, but it was too much fiddle, and Buddy had sort of gotten into this whole new style that wasn't really a modern style, you know. And so I had to work around a couple things, and I just didn't like it. So I called Alan up and I said, "Man, you don't have to pay me or anything. Just let me come back in and take one more swing at these."
Oh, really? Like after you heard the mixes, you were like,
two songs. And he was kind enough. He said, "Man, I can't believe you called me. We're replacing the fiddle with this young fiddle player named Rob Hajakis."
Oh, who you knew?
Who I knew from Virginia, actually. Mm-hmm. And so we walked in and we did it together.
Whoa.
And it was so wild because Garth was like, "You guys are going to play on everything."
How did you approach it differently? Like, what was different about your part?
Well, for one thing, the other fiddle part was taken off. The other fiddle player was very busy. The thing with the way Buddy played it was very, very busy, and there wasn't a lot of space. But Rob was always very methodical. You know, he always had a beginning and a middle and an end to all his. I'd say he's one of the best studio musicians I ever worked with in my life. He's actually being inducted into the Nashville Cats in June, I think. But he was a hook player too, man. I mean, he wrote that intro on, Much Too Young. He wrote, She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy, which is, dubious whether it's a classic, but you can't, when you hear that intro, all that kind of stuff. But we started doing Garth, and then there was a songwriter named Don Cook who he'd written some hits for T.G. Shepherd and Lee Greenwood and stuff like that. And I'd drag my stuff over, and this is what I tell young players. They go, "How do I get started?" I said, "Man, just volunteer yourself, Do it all. Do it all. Don't say no." And then...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, nothing.
Did the Garth stuff take off immediately, or was it a slow burn?
Well, that was the most interesting thing in the world, because Much Too Young came out. And when I heard Much Too Young on the radio, I actually went, "Wow, this sounds different than anything else." And part of the reason was the way Alan recorded. He recorded analog through this, and they didn't over compress things and everything. So it hit the radio compressors differently.
Oh, okay.
So when it came on the radio, it sounded different than anything else.
Interesting.
It had a sound to it, and that song was just amazing, and it just was a great feeling track. I mean, it had a steel solo on it. And that song was like 49 or 50 on the charts. Capitol Records said, we're going to quit promoting this song.
Yeah.
And Garth and Bob Doyle, man, genius that he is, Bob Doyle said, "Wait a minute, this song's number one in Colorado Springs. This song's number one in Des Moines, And back then, it was illegal for a corporation to own more than 40 radio stations.
Yeah.
So Bob mortgaged his house and got money, and they hired an independent promoter named Terry Lays, and they set up a command center. And I'm not sure where it was. I think they had an office somewhere. They leased an office. And Garth would come in after working at the boot factory all day, the boot store, and he'd take a power nap, and he'd come in and he'd call the all-night DJs, because they had them back then.
Say, "I'm Garth Brooks, play my single."
Yeah, you're playing my single. I can't thank you enough. Oh, by the way, you have kids? Oh, yeah. Do they play sports? Yeah, my son's pitching Little League tomorrow night. Oh, that's so cool. And then Garth would call him up that night and say, "Hey, did he win?"
Oh, my God.
Garth has a photographic memory.
So he could work it.
He's incredible. He's incredible. He could meet I watched it so many times where he'd see somebody and say, "Hey," and a lot of times call them by their first name, and you'd see the guy afterwards and say, "I haven't seen this guy since 5 years ago. You remember my name?" So anyway, they managed, without the record company, they took that song up to number 9.
Wow. Were you playing live with him?
No. He delineated between the studio guys, and he had a road band. And back, his road band, when they first started going out, they were making nothing, man. They were all piled in a van, sleeping 5 to a room, and doing all this stuff. But he would go out, and he'd open for people like, I remember one time, I remember this vividly because the space shuttle had blown up.
Oh, in like 84 or
no, late 80s.
Oh yeah, 90, whatever that was.
It was probably late 80s. I think it was. We could ask, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It happened, and I walked into this place called McCabe's Pub to get some lunch, and I saw my friends that were playing for Holly Dunn. Holly Dunn was an artist that was around for a while.
Yeah.
And I said, how's the tour going? And they went, I said, what's the matter? I said, this guy Garth Brooks opened for us. And he'd climb up on the PA and he'd walk across tables and do all this stuff, and the crowd would leave after he played.
Oh my God.
And because, you know, Holly was sweet. She's not around anymore. She was a really kind person, but her songs were kind of boring. Daddy's Hands and, you know, all this stuff. And Garth was just a renegade. He was acting like a rock guy, you know, because he listened to George Strait, but he also listened to Kiss, and, you know, and he was just, and it started rising, and it didn't take long. I mean, it was maybe a year.
And he was really loyal to you as far as being the studio guy then. Like, you were clearly not in his band, but you played on...
Yeah, well, his band was not the studio band. They were the touring band, and then he had the studio band he kept together.
That's cool and kind of unique, right?
Incredibly unique. And honestly, you know, at one point I said, you know, when he sort of started recording again, I thought, man, you know, if I was Garth Brooks, I'd go out and find the best producers in the world and make this crazy record. But he just insisted on using the same band and doing all this stuff. And
did playing on those records suddenly, like, did you notice that you were getting calls and getting paid more and all that kind of stuff? Like, those are massive. Well,
that helped. And then you know, but the Brooks and Dunn stuff was really, when Don Cook said he was going to cut some sides on Kix Brooks, and we're sitting in the studio after hours at the Old Tree demo studio, and in walks Ronnie Dunn with the new head of Arista Records. And they said, this is going to be a duo. He went, well, you got any songs? What songs are we going to cut? And Ronnie pulled out a cassette with Neon Moon and Boot Scoot Boogie. The rest was history.
You were there for that?
Yeah, I mean, I did their first 4 records.
Yeah. And
it was a great band, and Brent Mason and John Jarvis on piano, and Rob was on fiddle on that stuff too. Yeah. So it was happening. But I mean, if I was in my element, I could produce. But I mean, there were times I got called for some sessions, man. And I mean, I fell flat on my ass.
Really?
Yeah, there were a couple producers that basically I got called and I never got called again.
Why do you think that was?
Because I just wasn't, you know, I wasn't Sonny Garrish or Paul Franklin. I was just me, and it was just basically, I think what we were talking about earlier, I was probably more of a stylist than I realized, you know, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting though.
But I mean, life was good, man. I mean, I made some, you know, I wish I'd taken a few tours that I was offered, you know, but back in the 90s, it was kind of terrifying to leave town.
And you were working a lot, and you probably just were.
And I had a big nut, man. I was married, and I had 2 kids, and my ex-wife did not work, you know, and we lived in a really nice house, and, you know, had horses and private schools, and, you know, so I was having
a big old nut.
Yeah, and I was writing some songs too. I mean, I had a couple of big cuts, you know. So I mean, it's I still have to pinch myself. It's, you know, I look back.
Yeah.
I told I don't know if you know who Pat Bergeson is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's actually coming over next week.
Brilliant musician.
Yeah, I mean, one of the greatest.
And I'm standing next to Pat, and I'm watching Keith Carlock and Near Felder and Jeff Coffin and Victor Wooten on stage. And I looked over at Pat, and I said, man, there's something wrong with this. Somehow I've made a living playing 4 chords on a bastard instrument, but there's no way I could get on stage with these guys.
Oh, well, you could.
You know, 'cause it's just, none of it makes sense. But
he's a freak. Pat Bergeson is like... Yeah, so good at guitar, and then so good at harmonica.
Oh, I know. Plays chromatic harp on a regular, you know, harp, diatonic, and it's just amazing. But I mean, there's not a lot of. I'm trying to figure out the right word. There's not necessarily a lot of justice in the music business.
I'll say.
With ability and success. And I think the hardest thing, it's like steel guitar is the greatest example. I know I can name 5 steel players that play circles around me. Just incredible. But I know one of them who, if he gets in the studio, he freezes up.
Oh, yeah. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, I've known another one. I mean, I felt kind of good a while back. It was kind of interesting. You know, when I was 16, I saw John McLaughlin in the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Nice. That's a mind opener.
And I remember, I'll never forget, we all went and I walked out of there and we didn't have any weed. And we all came out and we were all looking at each other going, man, I'm stoned and I didn't even smoke any weed. But years later, he played at the Ryman with Shakti.
Yeah.
And Joe Glazer had given my buddy and I some backstage passes because they had to leave. And so I went backstage, and all of a sudden I'm talking to John McLaughlin, who at the time was 80 years old and was still sitting cross-legged on the floor and standing up, you know. And we started talking, and I was just kind of in awe, you know. And I just looked at him and I said, man, I'm just a fan. I said, he asked me, he said, well, what you a guitar player? And I said, no, I'm a steel player. I've been a studio musician. He said, well, that's a whole different world. I did that for a while, and that's a discipline, you know. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it's, you know, it's like I'm grateful for it all, you know. Yeah. But now I'm trying to learn stuff. At 71 years old, so it's like,
that's good. You should always be doing that, I think.
You know, I just want to get into a situation where I can practice more. You know, I've kind of missed the pandemic a little bit.
Yeah, that was an interesting time for me too. Yeah, I totally know what you mean. Can you, now this is a big can of worms, but let's keep it to a small can of worms then. Steel-wise, have you changed things a lot in the way that you have, like, have you changed your tunings or your copedant or your pedal setup or anything like that dramatically over the years? Or have you been kind of a consistent
No, it's been very consistent.
Oh, yeah? Do you have a pretty standard setup?
Yeah, I have very standard. Lower my E's, raise my E's, half tone, you know, lower my second string, half and a whole, lower my 9. I raise my first and my 7th and my 8E flat. And I've got up levers on a few of my guitars, which I never use.
Yeah.
You know,
I took mine off because my steel in its case was 51 pounds.
Yeah.
And I kept getting charged extra on flights. So I took the left knee up off, and now it's 50 pounds.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well,
what about instruments? Like, have you owned a shit ton of steels over the years?
I've always pretty much been an Emmons player. I've never owned a Showbud. Yeah. I've never owned a good Showbud. I played a Zum when I was touring with Reba.
Oh, yeah.
I also played a Carter when I was tuning with Reba, and they were both, you know, I even recorded a little bit with the Carter. The Zum, I wish I had that particular Zum back, just because it was a good guitar, and it actually sounded pretty good. But it's just, I've always been drawn to that Emmons sound. But this year I've been playing my Franklin on everything.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've got a really good Franklin.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to play it. I didn't want to.
Why?
Because Paul and Mike Johnson are Franklin players, and they have a sound. But then I suddenly realized that it still sounds like me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but the Franklin is great studio guitar, and I've been enjoying it. I may go back to playing my push-pull.
Oh, wow. Okay,
80% of the records that I made, I cut on an Emmons.
Like a particular one, or just various Emmonses?
I had the Live in London guitar, that Emmons, I used on the majority of the Brooks and Dunn stuff. I used it on the majority of the Garth stuff. I used it on a lot of records, but I've had a couple different Legrands. I think I'm going to be able to get the Shameless Legrand back. That was a funny story. I had that guitar, and that was one that Weldon and I put a metal brace in the front of it to see if that would stop cabinet drop, and it really doesn't have that much cabinet drop. But back then I was like
obsessed.
With everything. You know, does this chord sound better? Does this battery sound better? You know, all that bullshit. But I remember cutting that record, and I went into overdub, and then I spent all morning trying to play the Billy Joel synth part on steel because Garth's road guy had sort of tried to do that, and that's what Garth was used to. And I couldn't get it, and I finally said, man, let's go to lunch. And he went to the bathroom, and when I told the producer while he was in the bathroom, I said, man, this sucks. It's not set up on steel to be able to play that part. And Garth came back and said, hey, man, when you get back to the studio, play what you feel. And I went in and cut the intro first take.
Right.
It's just licks. But I was so burnt out with that guitar after that day, and I just decided, and I thought it had cabinet drop or whatever, and I said, screw it. And I traded it for another push-pull. And I'll never forget, about a week after Shameless came out, the great Richard Bennett, who I know you work with, and he won't remember this, but he came up to me, and you know how Richard is just such a gentleman, and so precise and everything. Bruce, I loved the sound that you got on Shameless. That was just a wonderful steel guitar tone. And I went,
that means a lot, because he's a connoisseur of tone.
I sold that guitar, and so I think I'm going to get it back. I think I finally found it.
Oh yeah,
which may be fun because it's an all pull guitar.
Okay,
and it might be a cool guitar to start using in the studio.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's just,
And when you do a session now, what do you show up with? You've got your Emmons now. Do you have a rig that you?
Yeah, I've got right now my pedal board's down. I'm having a new pedal board built, so I've been coming in with a bag full of pedals and doing that. But I've been running through a Helix effects unit, and I've got an Iridium. If I play direct, I play through an Iridium, Strymon Iridium. I've got a black box, a Sarno black box, which I started using again because I've been doing more direct stuff lately, and a couple producers said, I like your direct sound because I do
no amp sim either, just like straight on direct.
No, I've got that Iridium, which is the Strymon.
It's like a deluxe.
But I've got two Kempers, and I'll sell you one if you want one. I mean, it's like, but I've got a really great. I've got so many amps. I've got a couple little Walters. I've got which I used for a while. I've got Third Power American Dream, which was a good sound amp. But I bought a cream-colored Bassman from Bukovac.
Oh, yeah. That probably sounds amazing.
About 3 or 4 months ago. That is just wonderful. But it's, but as I said, it's like I've been, playing through the Iridium and the black box, give some tube, and then I've got, I got one of those Ebo's
the
reverbs.
Spring reverbs, yeah.
Spring reverbs, and to me, it's just tone. I find something, and then I work to get the tone I'm hearing in my head. Yeah. But I've, it's so funny. I look back at some of my favorite steel tones that I got on records, and it was an Emmons through a pedal or two into a PV. Mm-hmm. All the Skaggs stuff was cut with a Session 400 or a Nashville 400.
I mean, that's what people used in those days. That was the thing, right?
All the Brooks and Dunn stuff. Well, I got to the point where I was using 2 amps, and I'd use an old Twin and a PV.
Oh, yeah.
PV had the mid-range forward and the Twin.
Oh, so you'd mix them together.
Yeah, and until I walked in the studio one day and I said, where's my other channel? And he said, we don't have room for it, because it was, still 24 tracks. Yeah. And now with Pro Tools, but I wouldn't go stereo on anything if you paid me. Yeah. If somebody said, hey, man, I want you to figure out a stereo rig, but I'm into mono.
No need. Yeah, mono's where it's at.
Yeah.
I'm doubling down on mono these days.
Yeah, I'm surprised that people even worry about going stereo, but it's evolution, and it's music, man. It's just, for me, it's just if it's a great song,
when they come along, it's magic.
It'll play itself. You'll find the part to play. I heard Bukovac one day talking about, I don't know if it was on a homeschooling or what, but he said when he first started doing records and stuff, he was on one record date with Kenny Greenberg, and he said, man, he's just struggling to find a part and everything. And they went in for a listen, and he said to Kenny, he said, man, I can't find a part. And Kenny said, well, you're not going to be able to. It's a shitty song.
Yeah,
and that's what we're dealing with.
Well, you've been fortunate enough to play on some friggin' classics, so There you go.
No, well, thanks, man. As I said, I try to tell people I'm probably the luckiest steel guitar player I know.
Well, I loved your playing, through all your eras, and honestly, that instructional thing that you made was a huge thing for me. Like, I started playing later, and kind of got my shit together a little bit, and then I came across that video or DVD, whatever it was, and man, the way you taught just made so much sense to me.
Yeah,
so,
I should spend more time teaching, but I just,
Yeah. Well, it worked for me.
The thing is, thank you so much. I think we talked about this the other day. I remember when I did it, Happy Traum, who's a great guy. He was the guy, one of the first guys to do teaching videos. He said, we'll do this video. I'll give you $1,000 advance and 10% of everything. And I thought, man, that's great. $1,000 in your hand, and it sold a lot of videos.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it was, but there's only so many steel players. It's not like guitar.
Like, how many of those got sold? Like 10,000 or something?
No.
Anyone that's a steel player should have it. I think it's really essential. For me, it was like exactly what I needed at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I just did the basic, but that's how Buddy Charlton was, when he taught, I mean, he would teach things that would, it's all really, to me, it's the nuance and the simplicity of being able to.
You broke down the grips of your right hand in a way that nobody had explained properly to me. And I still play like that. Like, I don't, maybe some of the other things I didn't retain, but there's like a way that you sort of move through your hand on the groups of strings that the way that you explained it made sense to me.
Well, I just, when I first started out, I just was sitting there going, oh, well, here's an F here, so I got to know all this. And so I go, boo, doo, 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 and then I go up and hit it with the pedals, and then I go and hit it at the octave, and all that stuff. And it's weird now because I've been, it's very strange. I mean, it's the most, and being a musician, I mean, when you play your muscle memory, and it's just, I can just go for something and it's in tune, and I don't know why or how. If I think about it too much, I'm fucked. But, but anyway, man, it was great hearing you play the other night, and I wasn't even aware. Are you guys playing anytime again soon?
Yeah, we're playing on Friday at, where are we on Friday? We're playing at Nectar, which is over in Donaldson.
Oh, Donaldson.
Yeah.
What time?
I think it's at 5:30.
Do you play outside?
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
We
nice.
actually haven't played there before. We played across the street at Tenfold.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be there on Friday.
Well, cool.
Yeah, man. We did a show at Cheekwood the other day. We're playing a lot right now. It's funny. It's like,
are you playing Urban Cowboy again soon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get on the mailing list, or you'll let me know now that we're friends.
I'll text you.
Can text me and just let me know when you're playing. I'll come out. I mean,
well, if you feel like sitting in, Rob X comes and sits in sometimes.
Well, I'm not on that level. I mean, I always joke. People say I'm a steel player that owns a dobro.
That's all right. You should bring it next time if you feel like it.
No, for me, I've got to, I know what I know, but I really do need to get back on my lap steel stuff a little more and just some of these different tunings. So maybe I can bug you one day and you can show me a couple.
I'll trade you. I'll swap you for a steel lesson.
All right. That's a good trade.
All right.
Wonderful.
Well, thanks, man.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Music Makers and Soul Shakers is a bi-weekly podcast produced at the Henhouse studio in Nashville, Tennessee. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can also find us at makersandShakerspodcast.com. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors this season. We couldn't do this without them. Larrivee Guitars, Chase Bliss Pedals, Fab Filter, Odyssey Headphones, Railtown Mastering, Isotope, and the Henhouse Hang. And of course, you for listening. We'll see you next time for another episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers.